episode 48 of the Fire Protection Podcast, powered by InspectPoint. Today, my guest is Todd Stevens. Todd has been a guest on the podcast before. He's currently working for CEVO IFP, CEVO Industrial Fire Protection. Really cool company. Obviously, CEVO is known for their special hazards and some of their clean agent equipment out there. CEVO IFP is getting more involved in some of the contracting side, installation, service, and maintenance, and all that. Todd was on a podcast a couple years ago at this point to discuss different foam testing technology with all the craziness and in the foam fire protection market. Since that time, there's been a lot of regulation around that, so we kind of catch up on what fire protection firefighting foam looks like and what we're doing differently to protect aircraft hangars. And CEVO IFP's come out with some pretty cool technology to do that. We also get in kind of touch on some of the regulations around the clean agent market with the EPA and the AIM Act and all the HFC bans coming out. So really timely with a lot of the stuff, the 3M announcement for the Novec 1230 and all that. So really good to talk to Todd. And unfortunately, I did have my the Eagles logo behind. I'm a big Eagles fan, and I probably did them wrong by having that background, and they didn't come out winners of the Super Bowl. So I've recorded this a few weeks back. Anyway, hope you like the podcast, and please like and subscribe. Thanks. All right, we are live. Todd, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful today. How are you?
We are not at the golf course that we recorded this at last time. So
A couple years back, yeah, we did that in a country club at a golf course. Why did we not plan that this time?
In the dining room, which they were like cleaning up. It was kind of fun.
It was.
So that was when was that? That was 2019. So that was almost 4 years ago, which is crazy.
Yep.
And it, the topic we talked about last time was some similar. Obviously, you're in a different role now. Want to learn about that a little bit, but it kind of went down I think we talked about fire DOS, right? And some of the foam proportion testing.
Exactly. We spent a lot of time talking about foam and foam proportioning, and yep, that's correct.
Cool. Well, if anybody hasn't listened to that one, please listen to that one. But Todd Stevens from CEVO IFP or IF Industrial Fire Protection. I guess let everybody know who you are. And obviously a lot of people listen to the podcast know who you are already, but
sure.
Yeah, shoot.
Yeah, IFP, as you mentioned, Industrial Fire Protection. We are a complete turnkey design, installation, maintenance, fire suppression contractor. So we do the whole package. We are based just outside of Kansas City in Lenexa, Kansas. But a lot of our team is kind of remote all over the US, and we follow our customers wherever those needs are. So we really do work all across the US market, and all fire suppression, whether it's clean agents, water mists, foam, and then of course the big element of the detection and control side as well, and getting involved in that side of it. We see a lot of different neat things, and it's really just providing the support to our customers for special hazard needs. So
yeah, nice. Yeah, I knew. So you guys are kind of attached or an arm of CEVO, which I have known for years and years.
sure.
So it's not just that. You guys are branching off doing every kind of special hazards out there, right?
Yeah, we are, and that's a good point. It is. So what makes IFP unique is that we do have kind of a direct link to that manufacturing side. CEVO Systems, as a lot of you know, is a manufacturer of clean agent systems. Where the installer side, we are a separate company altogether, but we do have that link to CEVO So we are able to get more involved in some direct design of different systems, if you will, that IFP is kind of creating and developing with CEVO as a partner. But yes, you're absolutely correct. We're not just focused on clean agent. We are a typical contractor. We're a distributor of a lot of different products out there that you guys all know in the water mist industry, and like I said, in the detection and control side of it. So, yeah.
What's your favorite special hazard
Oh boy.
to work on,
Um,
and then just in general? I have my favorites have kind of evolved over the years too. So
yeah, I think a big part of what we do is the clean agent side of things, and that's something that's been near and dear to my heart over the years. So that's probably one of my biggest joys is doing layouts and designs of clean agent systems. But what's really changed in the industry, the detection and control side is really unique.
yeah,
I'm not talking about just basic fire alarm. I'm talking about really cool, flame detection and hydrogen detection and all sorts of unique aspects that really help me think outside of the box of, hey, it's not just about discharging a clean agent system. What are those things prior to that we can use to help perform a better special hazard system? So yeah.
yeah. I went to Penn Station or Moynihan Station recently, and I had worked on a project at Moynihan Station way back when I was at Viking, and there are these there are cycling deluge systems essentially in the terminal where it was like huge glass ceilings, and if you've been to Moynihan, it is beautiful. But they took the Viking, the long throw 638, I think. They popped the head out, and they did, Viking. We did special testing for this at the time with the deluge systems, but those were deluge systems were great, but it was all the detection that was the coolest part. It was like a flame detector of something happening on the train floor that would set this whole system off, and then they would, you know, and then if there's a false activation or whatever, there was obviously a remote shut off switch. So there's this whole approval process kind of um, beyond code, which was cool to work with the FDNY, with the engineers, and obviously the manufacturer and the fire alarm detection. So it was a kind of a cool project, but the detection was I think the brains of it.
Yeah, 100%. We're seeing that a lot. One of the things that IFP gets very much involved in market wise is clean energy, the
Yep.
ESS market, battery storage, and talk about detection with that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting with off gas detection, and just recently getting involved in projects where they had smoke, they had heat, they had off gas, and they had hydrogen. They had all four of those types of detection
Wow.
in one container, all doing unique things, and trying to wrap our head around when is that detection actually going to activate in a fire or an event, and what should we do with it, with that information. So yeah, I think the different technologies offer some unique aspects to that, and the ESS market's a big one for
So the ESS energy storage systems, is that what it
Yep,
is?
yep.
Is there any other solution now? You see the crazy videos on YouTube or whatever of somebody throwing a lithium-ion battery in Novec 1230 fluid, or I mean, you see all these lithium battery. I saw one the other day. It was like a wife and her a mom and her kids, and it must have been a toy that caught fire, and
Mhm.
she's trying to put the thing out. Like, no, just get out of the house or toss the battery outside if you can with a shovel. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I guess what solutions are out there to suppress, and it seems like there isn't from my perspective, and it's probably the detection that's going to obviously to be the first piece, right?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that, like you just said, the detection is number one in reference to, again, and you have to really dive into a battery fire, and not to get too into the weeds, but when you start talking about off gassing and thermal runaway and that sort of thing, understanding those stages of a battery fire, and then within those stages, how to react. As far as new technologies out there, I mean, there's a lot of different options and
Mhm.
avenues, and there is some suppression agencies. Again, there's clean agent options, there's water mist options. But the question I always ask, and I've always learned to ask, is what are we protecting? You know,
Right.
is it a class A fire? Is it a class C fire? Or are we trying to protect thermal runaway? And those are the questions you need to understand, and not to, I think a lot of people mislead their customers in the sense of saying, oh yeah, we're going to put this system in, it's going to stop thermal runaway. Well, is that really what you're doing? And wrapping your head around what technology does what. So,
Right.
and to answer your question more directly too, a lot of it has to do with the battery manufacturer and how those racks are built and how the batteries
Mhm.
are built. All these batteries are unique, in how that cell is designed, and you know, how can we attack it if there is a fire, if it's completely enclosed, if it's open. You know, you have to go through that risk assessment, in that analysis, based on the battery manufacturer.
Right.
um, and you're seeing more battery manufacturers get more involved in that side of it to help protect their their batteries, and developing different ways that they think is going to work best from a fire suppression standpoint or detection standpoint. So,
Yeah, I mean, you see Tesla with obviously, they're probably one of the largest on the large battery scale, right?
mhm,
Where they've hired some pretty high powered fire protection engineers on their team, right?
yeah,
And they keep growing that out. And I think that's internally, but also externally, right? Where they've got to figure out on their own systems and own batteries that they're selling, whether it's the power walls or some of the industrial and batteries that they sell, and
mhm,
how just at least for the next few years, since that's being bigger, the federal government is kind of funding that, and there's a lot of emphasis on it. But that's, you know, there's a few negative sides to lithium ion batteries, and one of them's fire, right?
yeah.
So
Yeah, we always, I mean, we've been talking about lithium ion batteries for a long time, right? I mean, for years, and we almost kind of in our industry got sick of the next webinar that came up about lithium ion batteries. It was like, oh, another one. But you know, I think we've learned a lot over the last, 3 or 4 years. And again, I don't know, we ask the question, is it a fire problem or is it a battery problem, right? Like
right.
whose issue really is it, to handle? And of course we want to do everything we can from a fire standpoint to help that scenario, but the battery does pose a lot of challenges, and just,
Yep.
and that's what we have to, to work with, and develop some new ways and new ideas. So
Well, there's a ripe opportunity in the market right now because
yeah.
since the emphasis on moving to more electric, I mean, the car manufacturers are kind of going electric, and I'm personally, I would love to get a power wall
Mm.
in our new house, but I don't know. I'm also like skeptical. I'm not skeptical of it. It's just like, being in the fire industry, you see see all the negative sides of it. So it's like, and I have got some buddies that work out at the Gigafactory out in Nevada. So
Mm.
it's pretty cool to see what they're doing. But obviously, we got to solve that problem. And again, there's enough money being poured into that side of the industry that we could solve that. So
Yeah, and I think, I've always said to people, I'm impressed with electric cars. I would buy one tomorrow, but I probably would not park it in my garage. That it scares me, because we've seen it too often, and I know it's a unique case, and all the parameters have to be just right for a fire in that type of scenario, but they do exist, and that's, yeah, it makes
so
me a
no
little
power
nervous.
wall in your house either.
No power wall, not even any solar panels. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I love that idea, that concept of, hey, let's throw solar powers on the roof, and let's store that energy in a power wall in my garage, and let me plug my electric car. It's really cool. It's Jetson like, right? I think it's awesome. But it's just not something I'm gonna jump into tomorrow to do because of that fire hazard. So,
Yeah, I think there could be a software solution. I mean, if if you're monitoring those battery and the energy systems, if you're monitoring it, at least that's your detection system from a software point of view.
Yep.
If they're detecting, different gases, or even just detecting temperature,
Mhm.
remotely, send something to your phone saying, hey, you've got an issue.
Mhm.
So I think there's some software aspects of that could help, not only just the detection side, but the software side of those batteries.
Sounds like an offshoot of Inspect Point.
Yeah, yeah. New startup idea, right?
Yeah.
Um, well, cool. Anything, I guess what's in the IFP kind of working on, any cool projects you can tell us about, any cool things you're working on that you want to kind of get out to the market.
Yeah, I think we spent some time talking about ESS. That's a big part of what we do, and like I said, clean energy and different aspects of that. We're very involved in the government sector and government projects. Obviously, data centers, which is common to our industry, and a lot of folks are involved in. But another key element to what we do is the aviation market.
Mhm.
In the aviation market, meaning everything from a small data closet in the terminal to protection of the control tower to protection of the aircraft hangars within those facilities, or even wheeled extinguisher units.
Yep.
So there's a lot within the aviation market. We've kind of got a little bit of a niche going with that. There's a lot of conversation about foam and concerns with foam and the changes and regulations
Oh
to
yeah.
foam products out there. And we're, you know, involved with alternatives to that within aircraft hangars.
Yep.
And, we've done some testing, we've moved forward with some projects, and we've successfully, moved forward with the idea of utilizing clean agent in aircraft hangars.
Yeah.
I know water mist is out there as well. You're seeing some of that pop up,
Hmm.
and some opportunities. So there's, again, I think what makes us innovative is thinking again outside of the box. We have issues with regulations today. What can we do to combat that, and to come up with new ideas for our industry that we can utilize? So.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole foam thing it's a bit of a mess. Um, from all the obviously safety and not environmental. I guess it's a little bit environmental, but it's a safety thing, and taking essentially every foam, even in the firefighting side, out of
Mhm.
the market and putting in new. I think you can do that from the firefighting aspect on their trucks and everything pretty easily. But
Yep.
how, and does it fight the fire the same? I know there's a debate on that, but I think the fixed systems foam side is 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 a lot. It's a lot bigger, right? I feel
Mhm.
like every 5 to 10 years, there's a transformation of these foam systems from,
Mm.
what was it, the animal based product. I forgot what it
Yeah.
was.
Yes, I know what you're talking
Made of like
about.
crushed bone, and
Yeah.
know
And
that
then it
from my
went to
old Ansel days.
C8, and then to C6, and then,
Yep.
you and I went through that when we worked together at Viking, and
Yep.
just those changes. And it was interesting because it was such a, and I give foam manufacturers a lot of credit,
Yeah.
because they dealt with a lot going from C8 to C6, and it was this whole big change, and understanding um, the capabilities of the new C6 foam, and
Yep.
how that relates to the systems that are already installed. Like, can you just swap it out? Is it compatible? Is it not compatible? And then all of a sudden it seemed like not even a year later, it was like, yeah, no, we
I
don't
know.
want C6 foam either. And we got to go to fluorine free. And like I said, I give those guys a lot of credit. It kind of stinks for them that they went through that process and then
Yeah.
got hit again with that. But yeah, it's been a challenge, but there's a lot of great fluorine-free options out there. I
Hmm.
think that the important thing for installers like myself is to understand, what does that mean if somebody says to me, well, I want a fluorine-free foam, and I currently have an existing AFFF system.
Right.
um, can I just swap it out? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. You're replacing a lot, whether it's
Yeah.
discharge devices, the bladder tanks, the proportioners,
Even
It's
the pipe
not
probably, right? Because if you have to
right.
redo the hydraulic calc, and then the heads aren't listed with that foam, it's just like it's just a mess.
Yeah, and even the thought that if a system actually activated at any time, you have potentially have that AFFF foam that was in that piping, so that
Right.
that piping itself is now contaminated.
Oh
So,
gosh.
because it's got PFAS, it's bad.
Yeah.
And how do can we flush that piping and clean it out, or do we just pull it all down and replace it, like you had said? So there's a lot more to it from that aspect. So
That's crazy. So how does the clean agent hanger protection work? It just comes from the ceiling, and I know it's heavier than air.
mhm.
Is that how it comes down from the ceiling, or is it from the floor or from the wall?
Yeah, the design of it is really based on the actual hangar size and the dimensions of the hangar and that sort of thing. Some of the initial testing that we actually did sidewall nozzles kind of shooting down, low and from the wall
Cool.
standpoint. But the more the recent testing is at the deck, and testing at 40, 45, 50 feet
Yep.
and shooting the agent straight down to attack the fire. Yep. Yep. So it's
Interesting.
it's generally it's a similar balanced clean agent system that people are familiar with, and it's at that ceiling level, using flame detection for activation as you would a
Hmm.
foam system.
Yep.
um, and yeah, it's pretty simple and straightforward. It's unique. Now, it's not a total flood. I know that comes up a lot, is we're not doing a complete total flood within the hangar. It's more of what we call a local flood, if you will, or really a rate by area. Kind of using that same concept of local app with CO2 and that sort of thing. So, um,
Gotcha.
so it is a little bit of a different design, a little bit more unique, but yeah,
You got to
it's
do a door fan test on the hanger.
you do not, no, and again, because it's not a total flood, we're not worried
Right.
about sealing the environment. We're not really even concerned so much about hold time. We're putting out that fire that quickly.
Oh
That
wow. So you could have the aircraft door open potentially.
Whenever we design a system, we require or request it to be closed
Okay.
during discharge. And
Yep.
we've learned a lot over the years, as far as some hangars like, oh yeah, the door is always closed, and some people say, no, they're always open. And
Right.
if they are open more, or we can't automatically close it, there's just some changes that we need to make in the design to make sure to
Gotcha.
create better coverage at that door, if it is open. But
Interesting.
yeah.
So how does is it if approval through like I guess maybe this is just me being out of the clean agent world for a little bit.
Sure.
Um, is it uh, is it a UL listing, or is it an FM approval for? Is there that for regular clean agent and kind of enclosed spaces? And I guess how does the approval translate to the new hanger protection?
Yeah, great question. I mean, yes, the equipment that we're utilizing is UL listed and FM approved, right?
Gotcha.
So where, the tanks and the agent and all the components and so forth are all listed like it would be in a data center application.
Right.
Um, what we've done, kind of goes back to aircraft hangars is NFPA 409.
Yep.
And, they've really opened the door up recently, where they know that foam is a little bit more of a concern environmentally. So the 2022 edition has opened up the opportunity to say, hey, listen, and if you're familiar with 409, they kind of have a list of ways to properly protect your hangar. And it depends on the size hangar and all that sort of thing. But without getting into a lot of the details, you have that selection of options. And then at the end, it says, or if none of these options you're using, you can use a new technology, and creating a risk assessment.
Hmm.
So kind of goes back to all NFPA standards the very beginning, chapter 1 always has a paragraph that says that they're not going to, and I'm paraphrasing, that they don't judge new technologies. You can use new technologies that are not specifically discussed in the standard, as long as you are not lessening the safety as intended by the standard, right?
Gotcha.
So, so 409 talks about foam. It doesn't say that you have to use foam. It does technically say, well, you can use new technologies. And that's in all NFPA standards, even 13 and that sort of thing. But what 409 has done is they've taken a step further and say, we're going to keep that statement in there, but now we're going to give more criteria. So now it's actually more strict, because it says,
Mm,
well, how do I know this new technology is acceptable and not providing less safety factor, right? So you have to go through a process of creating that risk assessment. And that risk assessment is in chapter 4 of the standard, and talks a lot about response time by the local fire department,
hmm
what type of vehicles they have to respond to. Talks about what type of hangar it is. Is it a maintenance hangar? Is it a storage hangar? And you go through that whole process. If there's a spill, what type of spill mitigation is involved? So that's all part of that risk assessment. So all the projects that we have moving forward, we've created a risk assessment and submitted that for approval by the local authorities and whoever's in charge of that process.
So who's I guess the AHJ, because the AHJ is sometimes the fire marshal, sometimes it's the owner, sometimes it's the insurer. I
Yeah.
mean, on the projects you've been working on with this, obviously you said the federal government, but are the insurers, probably the owners are involved because they've got aircrafts, right? Um, but is the fire officials involved as much, or is it more on
So
the
what you
owners?
see and what we've noticed within the aviation market is, if you're not familiar with the firefighters that are specific to aviation, but it's the ARF working group, the
Oh,
Air Fire Fighters Rescue, or Air Rescue Firefighters, and they're guys that are trained and specific to airports, and
yeah.
that they're firefighters on an airport,
hmm
basically.
hmm
And those guys have a big say in what happens to any of those facilities that are within that airport
Gotcha.
structure, and that within those boundaries. So they're a big part of it, but also, I mean, we've run into scenarios where a state fire marshal's involved, and or of course, the insurance companies and so forth are always somebody that we want to get in front of if necessary. But the ARF members seem to be the key people to discuss the details with, so that they understand what's in the building, and how to handle it when they if the trucks roll up to an event. So
Yeah. Well, it's crazy. I mean, the timing's almost, with this technology and this solution is pretty spot on, because obviously you have all the PFOS with the O, the PFOA with the O,
yeah,
issues. But then, I mean, it seems like over the last 2 years, there's been, and maybe they weren't getting publicized, but the false activations of some of the aircraft hangars, and the foam systems going off. It seems to have like picked up, at least in the last few. And maybe that's just me, and again, I
mm,
don't track it, but um, you see them over the news, and then you had that one tragedy with the
yeah, yeah,
one person, I think it was in California or whatever, which is awful. That they went in or they couldn't get out. So obviously you have that, but also the owners of those planes. I mean, you might have to scrap the plane afterward, right? Or really
yeah.
really throw it ringer to get it back up and running.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. I mean, yeah, that was, I think you're referring to the discharge in Ohio, or the
Okay.
gentleman who perished. It was a high
Yeah.
expansion foam system. And I think there's still some questions on whether what happened exactly there. But it was unfortunate, and it is a safety factor. But whether it's high expansion, whether it's AFFF, there's cleanup, right?
Yeah.
You need to properly contain that. that foam. You need to properly dispose of it. You can't just dump that stuff down the drain.
Right.
And there's a lot involved with that process. And there's a lot of expense involved with that process. And to your point, you could very much damage that aircraft. So the question we like to ask is, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to protect the aircraft hangar, or are we trying to protect the life safety in the aircrafts themselves, right? Now,
Yeah.
so an owner, obviously, there's more money in some of these planes than there is in the actual hangar itself. The hangar is 4 walls, and the plane itself is worth a heck of a lot more money. So
Yeah.
foam systems activate, properly put the fire out, do their job, but how much damage does it do to the actual aircraft, where a clean agent system activates, puts the fire out, and does not damage the aircraft. There's no residue, there's no cleanup, there's no need for containment, and that's a big aspect of what's really catching the eye of owners and contractors and stuff in the market right now as an option. So
Yeah. Um, Speaking of ARF and
sure,
that and 409, you know Aaron Johnson at all?
of course, yep,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course, yeah,
What's his
great guy.
opinion on this clean agent technology? I know he's presented a lot in the past, and um, I'm sure he's been kind of in the know of it, but I
Yeah.
guess what's his opinion on it?
Aaron's he's supportive. He's super knowledgeable and
Yeah,
knowledgeable in that market and that industry, and he's got a lot of friends in the in that industry, like you said, in ARF and that sort of thing. Yeah, I think he's excited to just see new technologies out there to provide more opportunities and more options for that environment. It's funny because he got me a little bit more involved in the whole eVTOL, the electric vertical
yeah,
takeoff and landing
yeah.
aspect. So we're sitting here talking about aircrafts and you know fuel fires, but now we're talking about electrical fires and aircrafts, and it's like a whole different than now you're tying in the whole ESS market. It's I think
Right.
the whole eVTOL is going to be pretty interesting, but he's been pretty involved in that market as well, and wrapping his head around some of the opportunities moving forward with that. So
It's funny, he presented at NAFED last year, and I was presenting, I think after him or whatever, the day after, and um, it's a heavy topic, right? Where
yeah.
like, oh, I didn't even, I knew about electric cars, but electric helicopters, um, and they're gonna Uber me or Blade, whatever the new one is. We're gonna take it across the Long Island Sound to New York City. I'm like, it's kind of, blew some people's minds in that presentation of
and it's
what's
and it's
what's going out
happening.
there. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's happening. It's not like it's just a dream. I mean, you talk about some of these companies like Joby and Lilium, and there's so many others that are building these. I read an article not too long ago that NetJets placed an order for 150 of them.
no way.
So
Wow.
yeah, and so that production's moving forward. The FAA has done a ton to prepare for it. I still don't know if we're really ready for it, but they're really, really cool. That's something I might want to purchase. Maybe not an electric car, but I will buy an electric plane. So,
Yeah, right.
but yeah, no, it's just, and it goes back to technology like that opens doors for our industry, right? I don't, there's so many people in our industry that are somewhat closed-minded, and they're still stuck on them. Well, we're just going to put Halon in a data center type thing. But when I hear eVTOL, I get excited because I think there's so many different opportunities for us as fire suppression contractors to get involved in that, the heliports, the
Mhm.
charging stations, and all that sort of thing. So as that technology continues to grow, it helps provide us with new opportunities. So
Yeah, and you've had the different markets within fire protection with the warehouses, and then obviously the data centers, and
mhm.
um now it's going into the transportation now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, transportation is definitely a big market. Yep.
So kind of like last topic here, there's a lot of, I think about a little over a year ago, I had John Demeter on, talking about the AIM Act, which is the American Investment, or I don't know, I forgot.
American Innovation and Manufacturing
Yeah.
Act.
So
Yeah.
essentially, it's tried to, I'm butchering this, but it's taking out a lot of the HFCs within the market, and you know, it was funny. Somebody brought it up to me that wasn't involved in fire protection the other day, and like, oh, what's the opportunity, you know, of looking at HSFCs and the inspect point platform and stuff like that, and at the overall, it HFCs are bigger in the HVAC in that market, but fire protection's gotten looped in, and obviously have to uh, kind of curb some of those chemicals, right?
Yeah.
So any update on the AIM Act? And I want to get into the 3M update at some point too.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the AIM Act, I think back, I mean, again, it's been a discussion for years, right, about HFCs and the concern. And there was
Yep.
always that, I guess we could say, threat that they would
Right.
phase down or phase out HFCs. And it's been a popular topic in our industry for a long time. I want to say it was close to the end of 2021 that we finally saw some traction, if you will, and the EPA basically said, yeah, HFC 227 and 125 and other HFCs are now part of this process that we are going to phase down. But it was interesting because they talked about 85% phase down of the production and consumption of HFCs by 2035.
Hmm.
We're only in 2023 right now.
Yeah.
So in my mind, well, hey, we got time and that sort of thing. But the interesting aspect of this was that happened, I think, officially the end of 2021. And then like January of last year, a lot of the OEMs sent out messages
Yep.
and letters to their customers saying, we're not going to support HFCs anymore.
It
So
shot up the price of everything too,
yeah,
right? Yeah. Crazy.
absolutely. But it was just, it kind of, with the idea of a phase down is always, you try to calm your customer down and say, oh yeah, no, it's still acceptable. It's just being phased down over a certain length of time. We'll work with you. And then all of a sudden we got cut off and it was like, well, you can't get HFCs anymore. No new
Wow.
designs, and it was really interesting to see that. I'm not an expert in it. I know there's when you talk about the manufacturing of HFCs, those companies, get credits for certain HFCs that they make, and they can only spend so many credits. And I'm butchering this, but basically it's understanding of, and there's refrigerants and that sort of thing, and the companies had to make those decisions on where do we make our biggest profit. And maybe fire protection HFCs really weren't that big a profit. So even though it is technically a phase down till 2035, excuse me, we're not going to see it.
Right.
I don't know what OEMs still even allow the use of HFCs or support the use of HFCs with new installations. So I want to be clear too, talk about support for new installations. Existing installations is still fine. I know
Yeah.
there's capabilities of refill and that sort of
Right.
thing. So that's not a concern, but the new designs, it's kind of interesting. It just kind of got shut off all of a sudden. So
Yeah. So the new installations, the HFCs, kind of being phased out or already phased out. So I mean, you're going to the fluoroketone. I guess I'm having to pull some stuff from my brain I haven't used in a while.
making you work
With
for it today.
Yeah, right. With 3M's Novec 1230, but they just put out a notice like a few weeks ago that they're going to start phasing that out. So it's just kind of wild.
Yeah.
I guess what's the deal? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, that announcement came out in December and created quite a stir in our
Hmm.
industry, and it's still a very hot topic and sensitive topic, I think, in general. I can't speak for 3M from the
Yep.
standpoint of what they're doing, why they're doing it. I can make some assumptions. I mean, we know that 3M is constantly in litigation for PFOS and PFOA issues within foam and other products that they manufacture that has PFOS and PFOA. And when we look at 3M as a whole, they're a very large company, roughly $35 billion business, where their PFAS manufacturing is maybe about 1.3, 1.4 billion. So if they're getting hit with so many litigations in their mind, a corporate decision, right? Well, we can just kind of stop manufacturing altogether, and that will get us kind of clear and free of future litigation. So from a business standpoint, I see what they're doing, or that's what I'm surmising what they're doing. The important thing is education and helping everybody understand that this is not being done due to any regulations at all.
Right.
FK is still perfectly acceptable by the EPA. It's acceptable by NFPA 2001. And there are other manufacturers of FK 5112 out there.
Okay, then that's FK is the equivalent in Novec 1230,
Yeah,
or
so Novec 1230 is the 3M branded
branding.
name. So in Novec 1230 is FK 5112.
Okay.
And that's what you'll see in NFPA 2001 as listed as FK 5112. So to do a little education, I'm going to go back because about 15 minutes ago, I made a comment and I was wrong because we were talking about foam and I said PFAS is bad, and I was incorrect in that. But what made foam bad and the regulations of foam was PFOS and PFOA, PFOS and PFOA. That's why foam is being regulated and removed from the industry. Foam is a PFAS, but again, PFAS is a very generic term for a lot of products.
Okay.
We're on a Zoom call right now. Our laptops, our cell phones, our cars, so many products that we have today have PFAS in it. So I think it's important to get that education out there that not all PFASs are created equal. There is a process to try to rebrand PFAS into different categories. And I think those different categories would be the new terminology of PBT, which is persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic. So is a PFAS BBT or is it non-BBT? Okay. So FK 5112 is a non-BBT PFAS. So it's non-persistent, which means it doesn't stay in the environment. It doesn't, it doesn't pertain to the groundwater. It evaporates and it's gone. It's not a forever chemical. You hear that terminology that all PFAS are forever chemicals. That's not a correct statement. It's non-bioaccumulative, which means it doesn't stay in you. It doesn't stay with you. And of course, it's non-toxic.
Have you ever been in a room when it's gone off?
I have, yeah. In testing applications. Yep.
Do you know what it does to your vocal cords?
Well, usually I wear a breathing apparatus in that scenario. So I've never breathed it in and tried talking.
I'm gonna out whatever. So I was on we were doing the Sapphires, Johnson Controls line, and they had us up to Ansel, and they discharged one, and then we got to go in the room, which probably wouldn't happen these days without a breathing apparatus, right? And you start talking, and in helium, your voice goes high, but with Novec or 5K, your voice goes really low like this. So if I ended up getting something in the next 10 years, and you know what it's from, I guess.
Well, it's funny because we joke about even all the foam testing, and you see, and heck, I went years ago, to a manufacturer for training, and they dump a bunch of foam and everybody's like walking around in it and they're like, oh wow, this is great. And I'm like, yeah, we don't do that today.
Yeah. I don't do it anymore.
But I think again, where IFP is moving forward with the CEVO as a manufacturer is continuing to move forward with the manufacturing of FK products and systems. You know, I think a lot of the manufacturers out there have already released statements pretty much saying the same thing, that production is going to continue to move forward. 3M is a big manufacturer of FK5112, but they're not the only one. So there are options out there. I truly believe it may even open the door for other manufacturers to say,
Yep.
hey, this is a good market I want to be in.
Right.
Again, it's a non-BBT. There is zero regulations occurring. There is nothing wrong with FK5112. Nothing's changed from December to today or prior to that, other than 3M making a business decision. I think that's
Yeah.
the key. It's frustrating for our industry because it does kind of put a dull light on the use of the clean agents, but I think it's important as us as members of the industry and to educate and to continue
Yep.
to get that information out there. And even, you know, some of the other guys like Honeywell, Chemours, DuPont, they've actually announced that they're continuing to increase their PFAS productions, and they've said that publicly because PFAS is in so many different products. We can't even imagine life without PFAS, to be honest with you. It's in some of the drugs, pharmaceutical industry, Prozac, Lipitor, even the new COVID-19 drug. They all contain PFAS, but they're non-BBT PFAS.
Right.
So without going on and on, I think the key thing here I want to get across to people is that not all PFAS are created equal. And FK5112 is a non-BBT PFAS, and it is not being regulated, and there is no reason why we should be concerned with utilizing it moving forward. So.
Yeah, and the manufacturers will pivot again to that different 5Ks, right, to get it listed and,
Sure.
and whatever else. So
of course, yep. Yep.
This is great, Todd. So want to wrap it up here. I don't know if I asked you quick response questions last time, but did I in the last? I don't know if I did or
I
not.
think you may have, yeah, because we talked about the superhero.
All right. So you still sound like you're from Boston, even though you live in North Carolina now.
17 years I've been here.
Yeah, you still got it in you. So, you know, if you had to pick a lobster roll, would it be cold or hot?
Oh, cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's not Connecticut style. That's the original New
No,
England style.
Maine. You know, I tell this story all the time. When I did this years ago, I was up in Portland, Maine, at this little bar right on the pier, and you know, having a drink or two. We're gonna order some lobster. Of course, we're Maine. That's what you eat. And this fishing boat comes in, and the guy, you know, I'm watching the guy get off his fishing boat, and he literally throws a sack of lobster around his shoulder and walks in the front door of this restaurant. And I joked and I stopped and I said to the bartender, I said, I want that lobster right there. And the guy's like, which one? He's like, this one. And he had him put the sack down, pulled the lobster out, put a colored tag on it. And he's like, all right, this one's for him. Make sure you go cook it. You can't get a fresher lobster. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very funny. Another one. Round of trade shows this year. Which ones are you most excited about?
Oh, wow. Well, you know, we talked a little bit about some of the markets that we're in. There is a ton of clean energy data conferences, as well as aviation conferences. There's so many out there. And it's exciting because, you know, we're fire protection, and, you know, a lot of those people don't see people like us, right? So we're kind of bringing a new concept to something for them to think about. So it's exciting instead of going to the same old conferences all the time. And, you know, it's great to see the people that we know and so forth, but I think we get more value out of some of these other conferences that, you know, like I said, the aviation and clean energy conferences. But I always do enjoy, you know, NFPA, of course, getting to see a lot of great people.
Yeah.
And I was asked to speak at the NAFED. You mentioned NAFED earlier today, this year, which is the first time I've been asked to do that. And I'm excited about that. So those conferences will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, NAFED's a good one. I spoke at it last year, and we're always active there, and it's always a good time. You get a good mix in the across the industry, especially on the suppression side.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that one should be fun this year.
Yeah. How about
Uh,
yourself?
what's that?
How about yourself? You guys do a lot of conferences and stuff. Do you have a
Uh yeah, we're trying to mix it. I'm trying not to. Unfortunately, I'm not going to go to as many this year. I want my team to go to them, right? I can't be the only person going all the time. I know um, it is a lot of fun. I get to do the podcast occasionally. I did it at FSSA last year. I did it at some of the NAFEDs and AFSA, NFSA, NFPA. NFPA is always a great time because everybody gets together
yeah,
from all
yeah.
sorts of fire protection. So that
Yeah,
one's really
that's the
cool.
point, right? I think with NFPA, it's not just suppression people, it's not just fire alarm people, it's everybody
Yeah,
at the event. So it's fun. Yeah.
I like when it was in Boston last year because it's cool and NFPA's in Boston. That was a lot of fun last year. So, but
Yeah.
Vegas always a good time.
Yeah.
It's at Mandalay this year. So, all right, last question. We got
Okay.
4 teams left. Who are you rooting for?
Oh man, I'm gonna get shot if I don't answer this correctly. But since, I know people can't see that we're on video, but Drew is there with an Philadelphia Eagles logo behind him. You know, I am a New England Patriots fan, and I can say that now. It's the end of the podcast, so people are going to start shutting it off now. But yeah, but because we are based out of the Kansas City market,
All
a lot of the
right.
people that I work for are Chiefs fans, so I think Mahomes is a special guy. So I think
Yes.
he's got a long history in front of him, and of course, me being a Brady fan, I can see a lot of that in Mahomes. So I think I'm going to pull for the Chiefs through the rest of the year here. So
All right. All right. That's fine. At least you didn't say the Niners. So I'm probably jinxing them by doing this before the game.
before the
NFC. Yeah, yeah. But
the Niners, who are the
it's all
Niners
good.
anyway? Come on, those West Coast teams, crazy.
I'm just glad the Giants lost. The Eagles squashed the Giants and the Cowboys lost. So it's a positive.
The evil empires are gone.
Yeah. Well, Todd, thanks again for joining. I guess where can we find you? Where can they find IFP?
You can reach me at my email address, tstevens@civoifp.com. I know a lot of you out there know me, and I will be, like I mentioned, at a lot of the events coming up this year with NAFED and NFPA and FSSA and that sort of thing. So I'm sure you'll find me somehow.
Great.
But I
All right.
appreciate the time, Drew. It's always a blast to chat with you, and always makes it you always make the conversations fun. So I appreciate that, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's getting easier. A lot of just spitballing, right?
Yeah. Well, great job.
All right.
It's a great podcast.
Thanks, Todd.
All right. Take care.
Take care. This was episode 48 of the Fire Protection Podcast. Want to again thank my guest Todd Stevens from CIVO IFP for coming on. He's always great to talk to. A lot of insight on the special hazards market, and very timely with everything going on with regulations around foam, clean agent, and everything else, aircraft hangars, stuff like that. So again, like and subscribe. Check out a demo of Inspect Point if you get a chance, and we'll see you here next time. Thanks.